Welcome to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, the daily talk show with the voice of Penn State football and men's basketball. You never know what special guest may stop on by any given day. Now here's the man of the hour, Mr. Steve Jones.
Welcome, great to have you with us. Kyle and I were just talking about the report, the financial report that is out, and everybody's, any public school has to report this to the Department of Education.
How much money is made, lost, everything.
You'll never know, for example, what Notre Dame's numbers are. You'll never know really what USC's numbers are because, for example, they're private schools. Yeah. Miami, Tulane,
Syracuse. They don't need to talk about it.
Don't. You can make assumptions. I mean,
okay.
But I said, when we're doing the numbers, there are people that perceive that you're trying to put down something. And that is 180 of the truth of what we're trying to do here. When I'm talking about these numbers, I'm explaining to all of you how difficult it is in today's environment of travel, hotels, recruiting, and so forth. I said, unless you have strong media contracts, you can't make money. That you can't do that.
Yeah.
I said it's difficult to do that. And we always, women's volleyball has had how many sellouts in Rec Hall, right? Now this is the report that goes up before the national championship year, right? I said, but it's hard to do that. I said, because they don't have the media contracts to do it. I said, wrestling, I said, sells everything out in Rec Hall.
They sold the BJC out, I believe, for this coming Friday.
Well, they sold that out in seconds.
But again, they sell out huge stadiums.
They're going to wedge people in there. What a great tribute to how much people love this program, right? And how much they give back to you with their performances. But if you don't have strong media contracts, because that's the difference maker in all of this, the strong media contracts that you have that can make a difference. And when I look at, what the Big Ten, because this is just the beginning of the Big Ten contract. And as I pointed out yesterday, I said there'll be some additions next year because CBS will now be all in as opposed to half. They were only in half on this one because they were splitting between the SEC the final year and the first year of the Big Ten. I said, plus there'll be natural increases built in because it'll also be the first year next year when they report of USC and UCLA being in. I said, that's not in the previous report.
That's all of a sudden going to bump numbers up a little bit.
Right, because the whole point is when you add people like that, it makes the pie bigger and everybody gets a bigger slice. Right? I said, the Playfly number is not in there because Playfly did not come on until the end of this deal. I said, well, that number doubled. I said, but the number doubled because primarily it is a football and men's basketball contract.
Yeah.
I said, that's what it is. Those are the, quote, media contracts that you have. Right?
Yeah.
And I said, what it shows you is that great success, women's volleyball, now a national champion, wrestling, always a national champion, selling out, popular beyond words, but it's hard in this environment to make money just off of ticket prices alone, and you need media contracts. Now, the argument, well, we're on national TV 5 times a year. Oh, for goodness sakes, the reason it's on the basketball line is they're on 28 times.
Yeah. And even when they're not on the main CBS, ESPN, whoever's, they're also on Peacock, and they're also they're on every single channel,
on every
single platform, constantly.
I mean, they were just on FS1, right? I think tonight is FS1.
I believe tonight is FS1. They've had Peacock was a week ago as well.
Right.
Peacock for the Oregon game, Northwestern. They're on main broadcasting channels, easy to view all the time.
Right, and so that's the difference. Those media contracts make a big difference in whether you're profitable or not. Now, the two basketballs would be helped out by a sweetheart deal at Jordan Center where they get to play for nothing, right? Sorry, but that's just a fact of life. That's why they're going over to Rec Hall tonight. I mean,
they have to pay money to use the Jordan court for practice. They have to use it for games, so on and so forth. It adds up.
Okay, if they just played at Rec Hall, the numbers would be even better.
And I think Mike would be happy because he's talked about it now publicly in press conferences, being like, I love playing in Rec Hall. It's a lot of fun.
Well, and look, tonight they'll play Ohio State. All right. Now, in any new arena, and they're all like this, so I'm not saying there's any difference between the Jordan Center and other places, but the crowd is more removed from the court in new arenas. There are certain places like Michigan State where they're pretty close.
Yeah.
Mackey, they're really close.
They're on top of you.
Right? I mean, because you've been there with us. You've been at Michigan State with us. There's some places like that. But, for example, you haven't done the Nebraska game, have you?
I have been in Nebraska. They're a little set back. Illinois, they're also set back a little bit. There's a little bit of floor space around the court.
They're set back. Here tonight, everybody across the way from our broadcast location, which, by the way, we used to be on that side with them when I did the games from 1981, 82 to whenever they got out of there.
Until I was born.
Until 90, I guess, 95, 96. I think January 7th, 96 was the last, game of the run. And they beat Wisconsin, and Penn State was ranked 25th in the country at the time. They were undefeated. And hey, we were on the opposite side. Well, now we're facing that group. They're right there on the sideline. Well, you don't think that influences? Now, the end zones are ridiculous at Rec Hall. I mean, they don't know. It's the greatest. No, that's ridiculous. Okay, they should be right up on the court. Okay, but for whatever reason, it's not like that. But the sideline, and you don't think that? I mean, Penn State actually had a student thrown out of a game once by an official.
Well, I remember
it's crazy.
I got to tour when I was, I think, 13 or 14. I went down and saw Cameron Indoor for the first time. And the reason that arena is so beloved is not just because it's Duke and not just because of where it is and how it looks, but also the reason the Cameron crazes are a thing is because they are literally like all the things they do, all of the actions they do, they are maybe millimeters behind a player's head the entire time.
Yeah, I know.
Like you are standing there out of bounds trying to pass it in, and they can spit in your ear if they wanted to. Like
the two places, actually three places that would be iconic basketball arenas that I have not been to. I have not been to Fog Allen Fieldhouse. Man, I'd love to do a game there. I have not been to Cameron.
Really?
No, never. I mean, when Penn State played Duke, it was always neutral. So I mean, I've done Penn State Duke games, but I've never, but never down there. And then the other one will change next week, and that's Pauley Pavilion. Now I know Pauley Pavilion is not a special building.
Yeah.
I mean, people are going to be, oh yeah, no, it's like I already know going in. It's Pauley Pavilion only because of who has played there, not because of the building.
It's the history, not the place.
Right. But that's so those two, Fog Allen and Cameron. I mean, because I've done games in the Smith Center, Rupp Arena, Assembly Hall. I mean, You've
been all over the place.
I've been everywhere, man. Okay, so that's just the good fortune of the career I've had. But so I haven't seen those two. I'm like, hopefully one day at some point I will. Even if it's just driving down and seeing it.
And when it comes to Duke and to Cameron Indoor, the reason I bring that up, not only is because of the arena and the fact that the fans are on top of you, but also because the ACC has announced, or ESPN has announced, they've picked up the option for the ACC through 2036.
Right.
And they also are looking to add in and quote-unquote maximize their deal. That would also involve the relationship with Notre Dame to get more games with, let's say, Notre Dame against Clemson, Notre Dame against Florida State, more of those games to give them more marquee matchups to then, of course, make more money, get more viewership expected. So this is now the expectation because Notre Dame currently plays 5 to 6 regular season ACC games and is a member of the ACC in all other sports, just not football. So one would expect them to try and get maybe the Clemson Florida State games to be more annual versus having?
Well, both sides need to do something because Notre Dame's schedule, no offense, is not very good.
It hurt them clearly in terms of just getting them seeding wise in the playoffs, because they didn't have much to. Everyone tried to bump them above like Penn State, and it was like you can't because they haven't played anybody else.
The Northern Illinois game, you needed to have another game on there. Now they had played Texas A&M at Texas A&M.
Yeah, so that was a big game.
Okay, that was the opener, but then they followed up with that dud, and after that. With all due respect, I think Army's a good team, not a great team. Okay, sorry, it's the way it is. Okay, Alabama may be out of the playoff, but winning a game against Alabama has more cachet than beating Army or Navy. I mean, that's not disparaging the teams, but their schedule's not good. Yeah. And Florida State was supposed to be that game.
And Florida State ended up being about the same equivalent as me playing football.
Right. I mean, Florida State probably would struggle against Northern Illinois, right? Because they have such a quarterback problem. And I'm not exaggerating. I think they would have struggled against Northern Illinois because they struggled against everybody this year. And that was supposed to be the game that changed everything up. Now, we talked about this ESPN option for how many years now?
Long time.
Okay. Again, part of the object of the show is, let's just take a week. During the course of the week, did you learn something you didn't know about sports? So that's why we've tried to stay ahead of the gambling issues. Going all the way back into the mid-teens. Watch out for the New Jersey case. Watch out for the New Jersey case. That way, when it came up, this audience should not have been surprised at all by it because we talked about it so many times. On this here with the ESPN option on the ACC, we've talked about it so many times that this, and we also talked about the timing of it. It would be late January, mid-February.
Well, they had until February 1st was the date I believe they had to either pick it up or not. And they, of course, it's now January 30th. They said, let's do it.
So viewers and listeners of this is not a surprise to you that this has happened. This is not news to you. We've talked about it so often about here's the key. The contract runs through 2027. The option runs through 2036. Okay. Now, there's no desire on ESPN's part to knock this one out of the park because the financials for them are great. They get programming for what they would perceive in the media world as a reasonable price. Right? It is not in the same realm as the Big Ten or the SEC. And that's a big problem. So now they're going to make some steps. Okay? They're going to work to a settlement now with Clemson and Florida State. They're trying to end the ongoing lawsuits against the conference. And this partnership, by the way, ESPN declined comment to their own reporter on picking up the option.
Which is some.
Hey, you won't talk to your own person?
Yeah.
Who wrote this thing? David Hale and Andrea Adelson. Imagine Andrea sitting there going, you guys are going to, I work for you. You're not going to comment? Okay.
But part of the way they're hoping to get Clemson, Florida State to settle, which they're hoping for, is the proposed plan
the way they're trying to wait.
The quote-unquote brand fund, which is they want to use. And the money would become, it's a percentage of the ACC's TV revenue would be included in the brand fund, and that money would be distributed to schools that annually generate the most revenue for the conference in football and men's and women's basketball. Clemson, Florida State, Miami, UNC are probably the top of those schools just in terms of it. So then they would end up getting more money. That's kind of the end goal.
Miami's questionable.
Yes.
Okay. There is no doubt when you look at the TV ratings, and I talked about that, the 18. Well, the 18, of which Penn State is one, make up 50% of all the TV ratings. Well, to their credit, Clemson and Florida State are in the 18. There's only 3 schools outside of Big Ten or SEC, Notre Dame, Clemson, Florida State. Okay? Yeah. Those are among the 18 that make up 50% of the TV ratings, and not just in a single year. This is going back to 2016 as a constant. So the sample size is a big one to let you know where it stands. So that's what Clemson and Florida State's argument has been. Men's basketball is no doubt North Carolina and Duke are extremely popular. Miami is a mixed bag.
They have
Miami
great years and bad years.
Yeah, Miami has to be really, really good. And Miami this year was very good to a point. I watched them early in the year and I thought, there's something not quite there with this team. And it showed up finally later in the year. Now, athletic directors have told ESPN this could involve using, as you pointed out, the ACC's relationship with Notre Dame. Pete Bavacqua, who's the Notre Dame athletic director, open to playing more games against Clemson in the future. Right? Notice he said Clemson, not Florida State.
Yeah.
Right? The Florida State thing turned out to be one of those it was nationally televised. I think it was opposite. It was opposite a Penn State game.
It was opposite a Penn State game.
The Washington game?
It was, I believe it was the Washington game, and everyone thought, oh, this is going to be a pretty good game.
November 9th?
Yeah. Attempting to pull it up as fast as one can.
It's okay. And it was one of those, now, Penn State was up 28-0 on Washington at halftime. But this is the proposed plan. A percentage of the ACC's television revenue would be included, as you pointed out, the brand fund. That money would then be distributed to schools that annually generate the most revenue.
By the way, it was November 9th, 52-3 final score. Florida State put 3 points up in the first quarter, and then...
Again, doubts on your part.
I did not doubt you. I wanted to fact check, and that's how I work.
Okay. Clemson, and they do point this out, and I do agree with this. They've been the one that's been cautious in their legal filings. Florida State's been vocal and aggressive with it. They would have to have a landing spot. And see, this is the part I pointed out the entire time. For whatever reason, there is a faction out there that thinks that people just can't wait for Florida State to be a free agent. Au contraire, mon frere. No. Okay? They're not. And when I was down in this question, because I did that speaking swing last year in Jacksonville at Daytona Beach, and it was the Jacksonville speech on the Friday night that I did, where I was asked about the Big Ten going to 20. And, of course, being in Florida, I know what they were aiming at. They were aiming at Florida State. And my answer was simple. I said, I want to see how 18 works first because nobody's ever done 18 before. Nobody. 16 had been I think the Big East at one point had between football and basketball at 17. Something like that. I said, but nobody's done 18 before. I said, where you have 18 in all sports, right? Men's soccer, women's men's basketball, women's volleyball, football, baseball, softball, everything, right? And I said, I want to see how that works first before you attempt to do 20. And I said, and you also have to have a desire to say, okay, how do they help us? What do they bring to the table? And there's no doubt Florida State has brought with it over the years. Very good, maybe not great, but very good basketball. There have been moments they have had great football, but they've only had one great football season in the last 10 years.
It was the Jameis group.
No, it was I'm talking about the Travis group that went undefeated. Talking about them. That's since Jameis went. I said 10 years.
My bad.
I said 10 years because Jameis has been out now for a while. I said, and the Jordan Travis group that went undefeated, then he got hurt and they didn't make the playoff, which obviously is that. I mean, anybody at Florida State that argues about that has a strong, legitimate argument. To be frank with you, they said a vote to support the new revenue distribution plan may not be unanimous. No kidding. I'm not going to sit there as a school and do this. Now, let's go give you a Pac-12 example. All right? And I've talked about this with Tony Knopp. I'm going to have lunch with Tony in 10 days once he gets back from the Super Bowl. because we're out there till Tuesday. So his text to me was that we need to break bread. No, we did last time for football.
I know.
It did. And Tony was talking about the Pac-12. Now, we all know that USC and in Los Angeles was the cornerstone of the Pac-12. So you get USC, UCLA. And Bill Moose was the athletic director of Washington State, who then left and took the job in Nebraska. And then that didn't go well at Nebraska. But he's the one that steadfastly said, everybody, all 12 of us are equal. And he was able to win the day on the vote. That was the point of demarcation for USC athletics. They looked around and said, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Right? And so when Mike Bohn had the opportunity, after going through this equal distribution model for a long period of time, this is not the Big Ten or the SEC, where there's so much money, equal distribution is, okay, you're now getting more than anybody else. I mean, as I said, I'm sure Mike probably said at one point, you're telling me Rutgers gets more media money than USC? I mean, I'm not you know, I'm not being a jerk.
No,
I'm saying if I'm in a meeting room, with all due respect, and I'm looking at my administration or my staff, and I'm saying, you're telling me Rutgers makes more money from media than the University of Southern California. That is a legitimate argument to put on the table, with all due respect to Rutgers. But location, they are getting it. Okay? So he called up Fox. He didn't call Kevin Warren, right? He called up Fox. I think it was Mark Silverman. And he said, look, can we get in? Because our contract's running out. And they're like, yeah, let's see what we can do here. Because, again, equal distribution, the value of USC, UCLA, when you're in the SEC, the value, you can go equal because there's so much money for everybody. In the Big Ten, you can go equal because there's so much money for everybody. When you're talking about the numbers they're talking about, instead of an average of $75 million a year, and the average they're getting at this point is like 28, right? With the hope that you can get to 45. That was the hope. They could get to 45. You're still 30 million short. And you're the University of Southern California. You are mentioned in the same breath as a brand, with Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Texas, okay, Alabama, Georgia. As a brand, you're mentioned in the same breath with them because you're USC.
Yeah.
Right? Washington State is not mentioned in that sentence. Neither is Oregon State. Right? The two San Francisco schools. Right? Stanford, Cal, not. Okay? When you have contracts the size the Big Ten has, and everybody's getting an equal share, you're darn right you're sitting there like going, hey, we don't need to have an unbalanced thing here. We're all doing pretty darn well, and we can do something with this money. The ACC has that issue. But when you start weighting, like Clemson, for example, or Florida State, and you have a basketball conference that has North Carolina. North Carolina is of all the schools in that conference, they are the single most desirable entity in that conference. That if they became a free agent, they actually would have the Big Ten and the SEC seriously vetting them to see if it's possible to do it, because they bring a lot to the table. Research triangle. Not good football. I mean, good.
They've had some years
good football,
okay.
Not great, and always great in basketball. But it's a brand name that they're not one of the 18 like Florida State and Clemson are. But there's something about them that's a little bit more.
And also in terms of, we discussed the money makers, and it's football, a chasm, men's basketball. Who is number one men's basketball? UNC's top 5, probably not 5.
Right.
Like, you've got them. And also, now their football is going to be really intriguing for a whole host of reasons by the name of Bill Belichick.
Yeah, we'll find out. We'll find out what he can and can't do with it. I don't know.
It's going to add something to it that adds more value.
All right. So, but in other words, this hurts a school. Let's go to your school. It hurts a school like Syracuse.
Yeah. Big time.
I mean, it does. It hurts Pitt. if you're going to unbalance things here. I don't mind bonuses.
Mm-hmm.
That was the Big East plan decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was always referred to as the Miami rule.
Mm-hmm.
If you won the conference, and this is back in the day, you got a $4 million bonus.
Fair.
Okay. And they were trying to do it to keep Miami in the Big East. Miami took the $4 million and went to the ACC. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think Miami's won an ACC championship in football, have they? I don't think so. I don't think they have.
We are going to find out in a second. Miami has not won an ACC championship game.
Right. Let's see. Florida State contributed roughly 15% of the value to the ACC's media rights deal, but received only 7% in distributions. Now, that's based on market valuation that the athletic director had put together at Florida State. And again, there is an argument there because they are one of the 18 schools that contributes to the 50% of the TV ratings in college sports. Now, the problem they both had is legally this. They not only signed the grant of rights once, but both of them signed the grant of rights twice. Okay? Under the category of fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But when the ACC deal came out, it was a 20-year deal. Okay? The original was 2011. And when it came out, it was like one of those wow, landmark deals. It was pretty good. Just like with Larry Scott in the Pac-12. Well, Larry Scott is considered to be, in some Pac-12 corners, or former Pac-12 corners, lower than dirt. But when his TV contract came out, okay, again, I always take people back, okay? Oh, was he hailed? He was a genius. Oh, the Pac-12 networks and this TV, a genius. And now it's like, no.
The Big Ten and the SEC came in with a sledgehammer and a bulldozer and said, hey,
so
we want the top spot.
Right? Now, according to Florida State's attorneys, now they say it's $700 million. I've heard 500. 500 is the number I heard. They're actually saying 700. They say it would take $700 million to leave the conference.
It's quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
That is one whole Beaver Stadium renovation.
Yeah, exactly. I understand the argument about this, but who are you? Okay? The ACC plays very good football. The SEC and the Big Ten play great football. Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, we get down to the Final Four this year. It was 2 Big Tens, an SEC, and an independent. Okay.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, the ACC got knocked out in the first round. Now, Clemson, to its credit, won 2 national titles. Florida State got ripped off.
They should have been a Final Four team last year.
Yeah, they got ripped off in all this. But I always felt that Pitt, and I've been on shows in Pittsburgh, and I said, look, I got to give Pitt credit. I said, they needed a landing spot in this chaos, and I said the ACC was probably the best landing spot they could find. But it doesn't work. Clemson comes in for what is perceived to be a big game at Acrisure Stadium. And the aerial view of the stadium, there's just a boatload of empty seats all over the place. And because it's the Steelers Stadium, the seats are yellow. And it stands out when nobody's sitting in them. And it just shows you. I mean, why is it Alabama has 100,000 and sells out? Texas has 100,000 and sells out. I think Sanford Stadium's 90 or something like that and sells out. And Ohio State's 104 and sells out. And Michigan's 111 and sells out. Penn State's 110 and sells out. And why does Tennessee have 101 and they sell out? Well, why is that? Okay? Because guess what? Football means something to all those places.
Yep.
Right? Auburn may be struggling in football, but guess what? All 86,000 seats at Jordan-Hare is sold out. In the ACC, you don't get a lot of sellouts. In fact, the second Clemson national championship, you want to know how many sellouts they had in 7 home games? None.
Well, yeah.
None.
It's bad.
Their second national title, with Trevor Lawrence as their quarterback, they had no sellouts. Now, they were close, but they did not sell out a single game that year. And okay. And I've been to that stadium.
Yeah.
Right? You're like, it's not even close in size to Beaver Stadium. They're like, okay. And that's ACC football. And Kenan Stadium rarely sells out. Right? Miami doesn't sell out.
They play in Hard Rock.
No, they're 20-something miles from campus. And it's halfway between Fort Lauderdale and Miami. And the university is a little further south of the city itself.
You got a bus there.
Right? And that's one of the problems that you have in the conference. Who in the Big Ten or the SEC shares a stadium with a pro team? None. Not a single one. Yet in the ACC, Miami shares with the Dolphins, Pitt shares with Pitt. All right? You don't have great situations. I mean, Boston College doesn't share the stadium, but they're buried in that market by the New England Patriots. I mean, my goodness, the Patriots, the Red Sox, the Celtics, and the Bruins. I mean, where does Boston College come up?
I'd put the New England Revolution above them.
Well, no, they draw really well.
Yeah.
And, you could say BC hockey, but, there's no ACC hockey. Right? And that's an issue. Georgia Tech's in Atlanta. Okay? Georgia Tech is a great academic institution. Not a good academic.
Incredible.
They are a great academic institution that is okay in basketball. They're good in basketball. And they're okay to good in football. But in the state of Georgia, they are just so far behind. Okay? Georgia gets all the headlines. The Falcons get a bunch of the headlines. Okay? The Braves get a bunch of the headlines. The Hawks get some, but they get more than Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Right? And it's great to claim that you have the city of Atlanta as a market, but you don't.
Do you?
But you don't own the market. You don't own the market. So we're talking about brands here. As an academic brand, Georgia Tech is unquestioned.
Yes.
Unquestioned. As an athletic brand, right? Okay, when they win, it's considered upsets.
Yeah.
Okay? Even though they were the better team than Florida State last year when they beat them in Ireland. And in the end, it proved out through the season they were the better team. At the moment, it was considered an upset.
Yeah.
Okay? Miami, upset. You start going through what they did. They had a terrific season, but when they won, it was upsets. Right? Because people don't perceive them as, right? And Bobby Dodd Stadium isn't sold out. Right? It's great to claim Atlanta as the market, but where are you in the market? It's like saying, hey, we've got Pittsburgh. You don't have Pittsburgh. Okay, there are more Penn State fans in Allegheny County than there are Pitt fans.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay? Now, the Pitt fans are more vocal. I would be too.
Yeah.
In other words, you don't. North Carolina, Duke's great, but North Carolina, NC State, Wake Forest, okay, but North Carolina is the one in that state that is
they're one. They're 1A.
They're one. Okay. When you're not even number one in your own state, you got a problem. Okay.
Right.
Outside of UCLA, who is not number one? Okay, you can the Michigan State, Indiana, Purdue thing, but they're the same conference.
Yeah.
Okay, but who's not number one in their state? Every single state the Big Ten's in, somebody in the conference is the number one team in that state. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you go to the ACC, right?
It's rough.
I mean, when you look at the whole thing, I mean, Boston College is the number one school in their state. Guess what? They're competing with the Patriots, the Celtics, the Red Sox, right? The Revolution.
The number one college in their state where they're in 12th position.
Bruins, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Stanford can't sniff California.
I mean, Syracuse. I mean, hey, who's more popular in that part of the world? There, the Buffalo Bills or Syracuse?
Yeah, it's Buffalo 1, Syracuse 2. That's how it is.
Right. It's the same thing with Georgia Tech. They're not even the number one school in their state. Georgia is.
Yeah.
See, and that's where you have direct ACC, SEC competition. Now, Clemson, South Carolina, I think you can debate.
Yeah.
Okay. Louisville, Kentucky. I think Kentucky is the one. And what's the other one? I guess it's Florida State. It's definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, Florida's pretty dominant in that state. But like that's the issue that the ACC has. I mean, SMU, okay, won the regular season championship, but they play in a 32,000-seat stadium.
And they've got the entire state of Texas to fight against.
Right. But they play in a 32,000-seat stadium. Now, Northwestern's downsizing to 35. Even their stadium at Northwestern, and we know what the situation is there, it's still going to be bigger than that. Right? Doak Campbell Stadium, which they're renovating, is 60,000 seats.
Yeah.
Now, again, we are at a point, I made this several times when it comes to stadium construction, where I was always surprised that SoFi Stadium was built the size it is. I think it's like 80,000 or something like that. Because like, look what Buffalo's doing. Highmark Stadium is going to be 65,000. Right? Originally, the current Highmark Stadium, former Ralph Wilson Rich Stadium, was 80,000 seats, and they kind of downsized it. Because when you have the ability to watch games on phones and
laptops
and
TVs
things like
tablets
that,
and all of it.
Yeah. You do have... Jack Hamcall. What? No, I was wondering why my phone was ringing. And I'll call him back. And in fact, I'll call him now. Enjoy the rest of the show. No,
of course.
Just kidding. But that's where we are in the media landscape. And this, I think the ACC saw the writing on the wall and said, hey, look, if we go out independently and try to make up for this, we're not going to be able to do it. And let's give you an example. SMU's taking no TV money. Cal and Stanford, you want to know how much they get per year out of this deal? $11 million. Now, okay, they're getting a 30% share. That's it. They're not even getting a half. They're getting less than a third. And that's a big, that tells you everything about where they are. Right? And that's why this Cal UCLA thing, it's like, who comes up with those stupid rules?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you sit back and go, like, over here in the back, do you guys have any common sense?
No.
I mean, seriously, I mean, that's a lack of common sense. But they were so desperate to find a landing spot because they were left behind. And you got people out there that will say, but look at Stanford. They're number one in the Learfield Cup. It doesn't matter what you are in the Learfield Cup. How are you in football? And can your men's basketball do something? All the other stuff is nice. I always refer to it as like the really neat thing. Hey, we won the national championship. That's neat. We didn't go do well this year. Oh, well. Right? Football, what the heck's going on here?
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean?
I know.
Like the anger over not winning. And even then, I'm not so sure how angry they are at Stanford and Cal. Right? But they, again, like, well, they'll give you the San Francisco market. Are you kidding me? They don't give you anything in San Francisco.
They put you in it, doesn't mean they give you it.
Give you anything. I mean, it's... There's a lack of common sense when it comes to what is here. And the Stanford Cal thing, they were desperate. They needed something. Well, the Big Ten would be great. The Big Ten's not going there. Right now, it's an academic consortium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you definitely would like to, hey, let's exchange some ideas here. You seem to have some decently smart people, except for the guy over that said that your TV rights were $45 million a school. We can eliminate that dude from the meeting, which is true. You know about that, right? So the next step is to settle all this, and something that Florida State and Clemson will ask for is they will ask for, in this agreement, a reduction of penalties in the grant of rights following the 2031 season. Now,
it'll give them an out later down the line.
Right, but, okay. The Big 12 and the SEC, their contracts run out past that.
Yeah.
Okay, where the writers of this article botch it up is the Big Ten rights run out before that. Okay? After 2031, no, the Big Ten will be on its next contract at that point. And remember, these things are going to be negotiated approximately a year and a half out of the end. The Big Ten contract runs through June 30, 2030.
So it'll be negotiated 2028, 2029.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So this article is incorrect.
Yes.
When it comes to the Big Ten part of it. The SEC does go past that. So does the Big 12.
Yes. Changing gears a little bit.
Yep.
Ratings-wise, the numbers are not out yet in terms of what the Champions League has done. But this year, the format has changed. Everyone's been talking about it in terms of the soccer landscape because it's the big competition. There's no Super League, even though people tried to make it happen. It was 36 teams basically playing a round-robin style thing. You got seeded in different ways.
Yep.
The final match day was yesterday, so I wanted to talk about it today a little bit.
This is the Champions League.
Champions League.
Yeah.
And how it's working is the top 8 teams in the standings all get byes to the second round, which fair. Then the teams 9 through 24 all get seeded in and into pots, into pairings, and then into pots and drawn out and to see how it works. So 9 and 10 will be together. 23 and 24 together, 9 or 10 will face 23 or 24, and it'll be lottery style.
Right.
And this has created some interesting stuff where, because of how the draw works, teams like Manchester City, one of the top teams in the world, is going to face Real Madrid or Bayern Munich because they all best around a little bit.
Right.
And this is now going to be going on, and just for those wondering out there what it looks like, it is a literal bracket from here on out. So they're going to do the drawing, and then as a bracket until the end. We'll know the exact layout, who everyone's going to play. So there's no redraws, which is something that angered everybody, is you'd have to constantly have a draw at all times in the Champions League. It was every other week there'd be a new drawing because it's like, oh, who's going to play who now?
Right.
And in the Final Four, you know who plays who based on just the bracket at that point. But it was just like, come on, give us just a path here. Now we have a bracket, and it's out. And I will say, I know streaming is a whole discussion to have. Paramount Plus has been the main home of the Champions League. It's been that in CBS.
Right.
I will give them credit. I think if anyone's done streaming the best, it has been soccer because of the global aspect of it. And they have crushed it. Their coverage, I know they brought on this week, they bring special guests on to their studio show. It's Kate Abdo, Jamie Carragher, Thierry Henry, Micah Richards. They brought on Scott Hansen to make it the witching hour, witching 90 minutes, what they did.
Right.
So the coverage is great. And I wanted to just shout that out. That is now going on. The draw is officially tomorrow. We'll find out who plays who when and how it's going to all work out.
And in the Premier League, nobody's catching
In the Premier
Liverpool.
League, yeah.
Nobody's catching Liverpool.
No one is catching Liverpool. But you know who...
you are shocked, I even know.
I know. But you know what is going on in the NFL world, who's going to catch who. The real question is, who are the Saints going to catch as their head coach? I don't know. I have no idea.
No, because... Who said no to them? I'm trying to think. It was last week.
Who said no to the Saints?
Yeah.
Joe Brady said no.
Joe Brady.
Cliff Kingsbury said no.
Yeah, Joe Brady said
Mike McCarthy pulled his name out.
Right.
And it currently looks like Kellen Moore is going to be the guy in New Orleans and just going through the head coaching hires, The other person you think would be Darren Rizzi. Darren Rizzi is going to end up becoming the Broncos defensive coordinator or special teams
no
coordinator.
offense to Kellen Moore. I don't get it. I've watched between the Cowboys and then the Chargers?
Cowboys,
I think
Chargers,
and now with the Eagles. Oh, look what he's doing. Oh, for goodness sakes. I mean, that's it. Okay, to be honest with you, like, you don't have Saquon Barkley. I don't think the Eagles are in the Super Bowl.
No.
Okay?
They didn't play well enough without him.
Right. So I've watched this guy for years, and he's bragged about. And no offense, I don't see it.
May I get on my soapbox?
Yeah, I don't see it.
Is that all right with you? So going through the head coaching hires around the league, we'll do that real fast. We haven't really talked about that on the show.
Sure.
Bears hired Ben Johnson, the hot name this year.
He's the offensive coordinator. I mean, what do many teams, what do they do when they hire? I'd say 8 times out of 10, they go with the opposite of what they had. If I had a player's coach, I want a disciplinarian. If I have a disciplinarian, I want a player's coach. If I had an offensive coach, I want a defensive coach.
Yeah.
Right?
Trying 180.
So Eberflus, defensive coach. In fact, he took the Cowboys defensive coordinator job. Defensive coach, they go with an offensive coach and Ben Johnson. The Jets, by the way, will wreck that pattern here.
Yes. So everything going on, the Falcons hired Jeff Ulbrich as their defensive coordinator. He was the fall guy for the Jets for half the season.
Sure.
Bears got Ben Johnson, also took Dennis Allen from the Saints for their defensive coordinator position. I think is good. They also took Declan Doyle, the tight end coach from the Denver Broncos, made him their OC. Bengals, of course, got Al Golden as defensive coordinator. The Browns, I believe, promoted Tommy Rees, former Notre Dame quarterback. Dallas Cowboys hired Brian Schottenheimer.
He'd been their tight ends coach, so they moved him up.
Cowboys hired Brian Schottenheimer, and then Nick Sorensen as their special teams, and then Eberflus for DC. But the big one, of course, Schottenheimer, the one no one else had on their list and their bingo cards for being hired this cycle. Lions, new DCs, OCs across the board. They got to hire everything.
Because Aaron Glenn took the Jets job.
And then, Glenn and Johnson are out. Colts got Lou
Anarumo from the Bengals. It kind of had run its course in Cincinnati. So
Jaguars hired Liam Cohen in one of the craziest 24, 48-hour stories I've seen of them bringing him in, him saying, I'm out, signing a contract with the Buccaneers to make him the highest coordinator.
We'll see what he does, but I mean, did you sit there and watch the Buccaneers offense and go, whoa, man, who's running that show?
Well, not only that,
they've been good, but not,
It also encapsulated the Jaguars, I think, because the Jaguars, Shad Khan sat there through interviews, almost lost out on the guy he loved because he didn't want to be there with Trent Baalke, the GM, and then finally was like, oh, we'll get rid of Baalke and hire you, and he was like, let's do it. So that happened. Raiders, of course, Pete Carroll. They also got Spy Tech from the Buccaneers because Brady's there. He's apparently running the show for the Raiders. No surprise. New England, Vrabel, McDaniels, that whole group, Aaron Glenn in New York. And then we get to my team, the New Orleans Saints. The team that has not hired a head coach, does not, I don't believe, have pretty much anything anymore in terms of defensive, offensive coordinators. None of it, because everyone's pretty much out right now. And I have seen so much on social media because I follow all the Saints reporters. I see what's going on. I'm paying attention to everything because I'm a Saints fan. And I see this all. And we're at a point where pretty much everyone who is getting hired for the head coaching positions, rightfully so, I think, as you would agree, is wanting to get their GM in place with them as well so they can be in agreement.
Well, not just be in agreement, but right now, like the Senior Bowl's going on, Shrine Games going on, and you would like to get input. You'd like to have your head coach on the ground, being a part of the interview process and not just your scouts, right? I mean, that's, because your job is going to be evaluate this. Then let's be in agreement as to how we want to attack free agency. And how you attack free agency and how the results are in free agency then impact how you draft.
Yeah.
So in other words, let's take the Eagles, for example. Well, free agency, they got Saquon Barkley. So now do the Eagles feel the need to draft a running back somewhere? No, they did draft the kid from Clemson, right?
Shipley.
Right. Will Shipley, but like he wasn't going to be the answer. He's just he's a good player.
You see something in him, maybe.
Right, but he's just another guy, right? But I use that as an example. You don't. I don't feel like now I have to draft somebody. I did not sign a corner. Well, it's because I'm gonna draft one. Right? Yeah. I think Quinyon Mitchell's better than any guy I could sign.
Cooper DeJean ain't bad either.
Right. But those are the first two picks were secondary guys. So that's why that free agency part then sets up what you do or don't do in the draft.
And if you have
no coach in place or general manager, right now this is the point where you can get firsthand, where instead of just doing the Indianapolis, hit and miss interviews as they come through the one-stop shopping, you can be on the ground, watch the workouts of the players on the field, pull them aside, talk with them a little bit, get a feel for them along the way. And right now the Saints don't have a coach or a general manager that would be at the top of the food chain making those decisions on the ground to help them make the decisions.
The Saints still, they do have their GM still. They still have Mickey Loomis, who is probably in the most stable job in the NFL. And that is where a lot of the discourse comes in for the Saints, because a lot of coaches go in and say, well, if someone's getting fired, it's going to be me. And that's the view a lot of these coaches have, because they see it as, I'm going to get hired in, and then when things go wrong, they're not letting go of Mickey Loomis, because he has been there, he has done that. He, of course, was there with Sean Payton. They won, and he's stuck through it all. And that Saints front office is pretty much locked in. And the Saints went into this offseason as the least desirable head coaching position in the NFL.
Yeah.
And that hurts me in my soul.
Yeah.
Because I see what this team has had, and I am critical of how the Saints have been run organizationally for the past few years. As when Drew Brees retired, you could see it coming from miles away.
Right.
The feeling was maybe Jameis Winston is the guy, but at the same time, we got to get someone else in. And Saints fans did not want to go trade for Deshaun Watson or Derek Carr, rightfully so, because neither's been good.
Right.
Then we're like, we need to draft a quarterback. What do? They draft Tommy Stevens, and then they go and get Ian Book.
Well, Tommy Stevens was drafted way back.
But it was him, and then but you could see Brees was getting near the end, and the Saints just refused to get a quarterback. Taysom Hill, great player, not the starting quarterback you need for the future. Every Saints fan agreed on that. It wasn't Taysom, it wasn't Jameis. You need to get someone in, and they just pushed the can down the road for the one position who you can't push the can down the road on.
Yeah. Okay.
And they thought maybe Rattler. Rattler, cool, but he's a project. He is not a guy you're chucking in there when you're sitting at 2-7. You say, yeah, let's make him our starting quarterback. Throwing him into the fire against incredible defenses in your division is the single stupidest decision you could make.
Well,
and here we are.
You know what? Sometimes you're caught between a rock and a hard place. So now you're saying we can still win it and we still have Drew Brees. Is he near the end? Yeah. But gee, if I could draft this defensive end or I could draft this offensive lineman, maybe we can win it this year because we still have Drew Brees. And I know you're supposed to think ahead, but sometimes when you do that, look, the Packers got away with it with Brett Favre and then eventually Aaron Rodgers, and they got away with it with Aaron Rodgers, eventually Jordan Love. But not many places get away with that. And one of the issues you have today is that I think there are only, let's pick a number, 15 quarterbacks that are really NFL-level quarterbacks in the league right now. That's it. Now, two of them are playing in the Super Bowl, obviously. But there aren't many NFL-level quarterbacks. You talk about Spencer Rattler being a project. To be honest with you, Kyle, most of the guys in this league are a project.
It's not even just the quarterback portion. It is the rest of it. That the Saints had one of the greatest drafts of all time in 2017 in terms of Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk, Marcus Williams, Alvin Kamara, Alex Anzalone, Trey Hendrickson. that is as good of a 6 picks you could ever have, pretty much. You didn't miss on any single one of them. They took that into the following season and said, we're going to trade up and go and get Marcus Davenport, who has been nothing but bad and injured the entire time he's been in the NFL.
Right.
The only player out of that group they took who's been okay was Will Clapp, who's played a little bit at O-line in terms of backing up guys, a couple games here or there. The following year, Eric McCoy, okay. G. Gardner-Johnson, good. The year after that, Cesar Ruiz has not been good. Zach Bond, they let him go, even though he showed promise. They just couldn't pay him because of the cap issues the Saints are having. And I know the Saints fans are going to come at me and say the cap isn't a thing. It still affects them clearly here.
Yeah.
And then the year afterwards, Peyton Turner, not been good. And you just go through the picks. Trevor Penning, not been good. Chris Olave's been good, but hurt, and there's only so much he can do when Michael Thomas is terrible and then gets injured and then has attitude issues and then he's gone. It's just you go through everything.
Right.
And they missed and said, no, everything's fine here. Like, it's the meme of the dog sitting in the house saying everything's fine even though the house is burning down. Gail Benson was trying to get them to do things, and they continually just don't. And then say everything's going to be fine. We don't own our future draft picks a lot of the time now, and we're sitting here trying to figure out who our coach is, but none of the coaching candidates they want to bring in even want to come here because, again, they want to have a one-to-one relationship with their GM, like someone in Aaron Glenn's cases where he went to the Jets job and got to in part hire a GM. Right. And now the Saints are sitting there, and it ain't looking pretty.
Yeah.
It ain't looking pretty.
One final note for everybody. We, of course, have seen the tragic crash at Reagan International between the Black Hawk helicopter and the American Airlines flight. 67 people have lost their lives, and our deepest condolences to their families, their friends, their communities of devastating loss. In the sports-related note to it, 14 members of the figure skating community were on that flight. They were at training in Wichita and were coming in to D.C. So our deepest condolences, but there is also a sports component to it, but more importantly, there's a life component to it. The incredible first responders, firefighters, Coast Guard, EMTs, everybody, police, that did everything they could to save them. But we all know that as of today, they're all gone. Jenna Hahn, Spencer Lane, their moms were two great teenage skaters were on that flight with their moms. It's just the whole thing is just absolutely tragic, and their life is no more valuable than any other life that was on there. That's the sports component to it in what is just an absolutely awful tragedy. So
thank you for listening to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, a 7 Mountain Media production. Come back at 11 every weekday for analysis of the latest happening in the sports landscape. From college football to European soccer, Steve and Kyle cover it all on Sports Talk with Steve Jones.